wasted our time. 2 hours
Beautiful.
talking about and not actually having picked anything up.
Lovely.
Hi, Dean.
Greetings.
2 weeks it's been. What have you been up to?
Are we recording now?
We are recording, yes.
Oh, well,
Everything's
I can't
online.
possibly comment about that. So what are we here for?
Well, firstly, we need to actually go through a couple of things. There's a few things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. And
before you even begin,
yeah.
couple of issues with the name of the show. So our good friend Pablo Estrada, so thank you very much, Pablo, wherever you are. You don't laugh. Just because he's my good friend, not your good friend, there's no need to scoff.
Yeah, well, love you, mate.
He's my only friend and he's not imaginary. Or he's my only friend who is not imaginary. So Pablo suggested some new names for the show.
Right.
And I thought for a change, I will run them by you rather than summarily abrogate myself the right of renaming the show as the show's godfather. So Pablo Estrada says Hellenic hindsights. What do you think about that? Hellenic hindsights.
The alliteration's there.
The alliteration is there, but hindsights, we're looking behind us. I thought we were a progressive show. We look forward.
That's not us.
We use the past as so much fuel to propel ourselves into the future.
Right.
So, not bad.
Not bad,
You got
not
the
bad.
alliteration,
Yeah,
Pablo. Then he says this, which is my favorite: Byzantine brooding.
That is good.
Or Romaic, it's kind of Byzantine, but it makes Anthony Caldelas happy, who says that the Byzantines weren't Byzantines, they were East Romans, and we said Romaic Ruminations. But Pablo's bringing it back to the Byzantines, and he's saying Byzantine broodings. We sit there and we brood over Byzantium, which is kind of the antithesis of what we said last show, which was that we shouldn't brood, we should just get on with the show.
Yeah.
So I'll keep that one. We have this one, Kolokotronis Chronicles. What do you reckon about that? Kolokotronis Chronicles.
Sort of. Yeah,
Because it asks the question, Kolokotronis was a great leader.
it was.
Kolokotronis was also the person that wrote to the Metropolitan of Ungro-Valachia and said, give me all your money. If you don't send me money, I will curse you and I will persecute
So
you.
what he
And
did.
if I die, my kids will persecute you and they will go after you as well. He was the guy who was imprisoned by King Otto. So he had something to say. And people said, well, that's terrible. He fought so hard to liberate Greece and then they threw him in jail to Nafplio. But then again, we understand that a lot of these Oplarchigi had a really hard time dealing with modern countries where you have to obey the law and you're not running the country for your own benefit and you're not special and there's equality between citizens unless you're Otto or a barbarian. So there's all that. It's a great Kolokotronis Chronicles, telling the story from the point of view of someone who was equivalent to an Afghan warlord, but really nice. So maybe we do that.
Maybe not.
Okay, maybe not. Appraisals of the Agora. See, Pablo's been really, really inventive. Appraisals of the Agora. What do you think of that?
Agora. And that was the central part of Athens where everyone, or I think most Greek city-states had an agora of
unless
sorts.
he meant Angora, in which case he was referring to a goat. But why I like appraisals of the Agora is because, the Agora is a market appraisals. You go and get a market appraisal when you're getting a valuation, all these things. So that's a good one. And then also appraisals of the Agora. Are we being asked to appraise the movie Agora, which is about Hypatia, the
of course.
Egyptian Greek philosopher.
Yeah. 550 AD.
Yeah, Rachel Weisz, I understand, plays the hapless Hypatia doing very Hypationic things like getting killed by a very very angry mob. So maybe that, maybe not. And then there was the Agora in Athens where people would go and talk and discuss things and meet each other.
That's actually a good one.
We have Facebook now for that, Pablo. So Fatso Vivlion or whatever you want to call it. Well, that's another one. And the last one, and I think this is just for you, Pete, because it's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Pontic perspective. What do you think about that?
Love it. Let's change it to that.
I was arguing. See, every time I mention the word Pondian, big smile goes onto your face, but I'm saying perspective. Do Pondians have perspective, Pete?
We do.
And how can they justify the statement they have perspective when they can't see past their nose? I'm going to get letters, so no. So they're the ones, but then I was thinking, okay, they're all lovely.
Yeah.
But in keeping with the alliteration, ruminations in Greek is mirikasmi, and then we need to find something equivalent to Romaic. And you know that from Homer's time onwards, they would use different tribal names in order to refer to the Greek whole. So in the Iliad, they're called Danai, the Greeks, the Danaans. Then there's the Achei, these kind of things. Could we possibly say Mygdonian mirikasmi, Mygdones, who were a tribe in Macedonia?
They were?
So, and we could use that as a metaphor, if you like.
When you say
Or the Myrmidons, you know, the Myrmidons from Thessaly.
Yes, of course.
Myrmidoni mirikasmi.
Myrmidons.
And what are they doing there? They're sitting there chewing the fat, chewing the cud, thinking over stuff. Now, thinking is overrated. I suggest that you don't try that at home as enfant. It is not a good
We
thing
don't
to
do any of that on this show.
We don't think.
No.
Thinking is for people
Devil's
who are sexually
playground. Yeah.
people who are sexually perverse. They do thinking.
That's right.
Okay, so
Nothing to do with us.
anyway, they're the ones that I think of. If you guys can think of any more, please don't let us know. We're not interested. Romaic Ruminations works fine, so we're told, and we're going to stick with that until next week.
Yeah.
No? All right, so I've run
We're
them by
always
you.
going to give it a thought.
I've run them
right?
by you and summarily dismissed them.
Yeah. But
as
keep
irrelevant.
Keep the suggestions coming, though.
Okay.
So, moving on from last fortnight's show, we got a fair bit of response from the people with regards to what's happening in Mount Sinai. So I thought what we'll do in today's show is start off with that,
Okay.
nice and heavy, okay, and just ask you because when we actually went to air, this was news that was just coming out at this particular point in time. Like there was just news coming out and there was a lot of information that we were receiving. But since then, you've actually done some research. You've gone into the...
No, absolutely not.
Come on, you've done some research.
But what I decided to do is I'll look at it from this point of view.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things here which are at issue. One is sovereignty, so
Right.
the right of a state to organise its own affairs without foreign interference and to make laws for its own country. So there's one legal issue there. The other one is respect of property rights.
Right.
And this is where these two concepts collide. So you have a situation where you have, as we said last time, these monks and the monastery's been there since the 6th century AD, which is a very, very long time. And what happened was in the 80s, the Egyptian government said, well, whoever has land that hasn't been registered in the cadastre, the titles office, if you're in Victoria, it needs to be registered.
Yeah.
So the monastery applied to have all of its land holdings registered according to Egyptian law. And it's not just the monastery. There are metocha, there are different plots of land in different parts of the peninsula which they own. And so that began in the 1980s.
Yeah.
See, Egypt is a lot more advanced than Greece is, because if this had been in Greece, it would have had to have happened in the 1970s to reach this point. They cut 10 years off it. They're really good. And the Egyptian government held that up. And the reason why that was held up is because they couldn't advance paperwork to verify their claim that it belongs to them.
Right.
And that makes sense because that land has been part of the monastery's holdings for centuries.
Yeah.
You know, and you would have thought that there's such a thing called adverse possession, where even if you can't prove that it's yours through paperwork, the fact that you've occupied that place for eons should be enough to convince a government, a cadastral authority, that it is yours. But no. So the whole idea was that the Egyptians said, you can't prove that it's yours or that you're legally entitled to it. Therefore, we need to have a bit of a chat about this, because if you can't prove, according to Egyptian law, this land belongs to Egypt, the Egyptian government, the Egyptian state. It's common land. So there have been court cases.
Right.
Starting 2015, there was a court case about this. And there have been behind-the-scenes negotiations between Egypt, Greece, and the monastery to sort all this out.
Right.
So what happened a few weeks ago is that there was the outcome of the court, which says that, look, you can't show that it's your land, you haven't advanced any documents, therefore that land is Egyptian land. In terms of the monastery, there's a further complication. There's the law of antiquities that says that any antiquities that are in Egypt belong to the Egyptian state. And similar antiquity laws apply in other parts of the world, including Greece. No, you can't just go and rip stuff out. That's so Elgin. Elgin was last season. Can't do that anymore.
No.
Albania has similar laws, and we have this problem in Albania with Greek, or should I say Orthodox monasteries, especially in northern Ipiros, that traditionally belong to the Orthodox Church, where the Albanian government said, no, this is Albanian government property because it's a classical national heritage item, so it belongs to us. And then you have a problem. So but we built this, and not only did we build it, but we have been having services here for over 1,000 years or whatever it is. No, it belongs to the state. Similarly, what is the status of Islamic monuments in Greece? They belong to the state. They don't belong to a specific Sufi order or anything like that. They belong to the state.
Right.
That's a bit different. And the reason why that's different is because the people that lived there, used those monuments, no longer there. But the monastery has been in continuous use since the 6th century. So this is the complicated situation, which is Mount Sinai. You have property rights on one hand, state rights, and the idea of this being a cultural monument of significance and it going under the antiquities laws. So originally people were saying they're kicking the monks out and this is terrible, and then the Egyptian government said, no, we're not kicking the monks out. And then everyone said, okay, as you were, let's go home. It's fake news, and they dismissed the whole thing. But you can't dismiss it because the issue is this. No, the monks are allowed to stay, but it is the Egyptian government that is saying you're allowed to stay.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, that's the situation anyway, because these monks are there on visas, which get renewed by the Egyptian government every year. They're not citizens. They're not considered native to the area. And
Really?
Not. Yeah, we spoke about Father Theophilos from Australia who lives there, and there are monks from Greece, other parts of the world who live there. So that's A, they're not considered natives. B, the monastery is considered a cultural monument, which means that at any time the government can move in by law and expropriate it and take its assets, or it claims that those assets, all the treasures that belong there, belong to it. Okay? But for the time being, it is tolerating or permitting or facilitating or any of these big words that you want to use, theory of names, is it descriptive, is it determinative, all of that. They're allowed to stay there.
Right.
But it is at the good graces of the Egyptian government.
Right.
Now, Greece is still trying to sort this out with Egypt. And that in itself is another problem, because this is where it gets even more complicated, Pete. From even an ecclesiastical perspective, Mount Sinai is an independent autonomous church with its own archbishop, but it is under the Patriarch of Jerusalem.
Right.
And the Patriarch of Jerusalem lives where? In Israel. Whereas the Patriarchate of Alexandria, which is in Egypt, has no jurisdiction over that.
Interesting.
So who are the players? You have a monastery that's been there since 6th century AD. I would have thought that that's an Egyptian monastery. How long do you have to be somewhere and be part of that place's life before you're considered part of that place? Well, it's an arbitrary distinction, isn't it, when you say that these people don't belong there?
Well, what was that place before Egypt took over, right? It wasn't an Ottoman?
It was part of the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
And then it was part of Mehmet Ali, who came from Kavala. He was an Albanian who came from Kavala.
Right.
Greek-speaking Albanian who went to Egypt and started his own dynasty.
Serious?
Absolutely. You don't know?
No.
Okay.
No idea.
So Mehmet Ali was this really, really interesting guy who decided, there's Egypt.
Yeah.
I'll have that, thanks. So he was from Kavala. He was in Egypt.
How did he make that decision?
Well, he had his soldiers. He was like a coup,
Fair enough.
And his son Ibrahim, or Ibrahimis που πήγε στην Peloponneso and tried to basically stamp out the Greek Revolution.
That's right, yeah.
Very brutally. And the plan was to remove all the Greeks from Peloponneso and bring in Falahin from Egypt. Yeah. And he was going to do that. That's that family. That's that Ibrahim.
Same
so if
family.
you go to downtown Cairo, you'll find a big statue of Ibrahim there. For us, Ibrahim is terrible. Creature, almost of legend, a monster.
Yeah.
He's a hero for them.
Really?
So from the 1800s, I think it was 1830s when he did this, Mehmet Ali, right up until King Farouk II,
Right.
which was in the 1950s, and then he was thrown out by Nasser. So, yeah, there was the Ottomans, and then it was the
Mehmet.
Albanian dynasty. That's why also when you see the paintings of that period, you see in the desert, for example, or in front of the pyramids, pictures of people wearing the fustanella. And you say, what's going on here? They are Albanians who were brought over by Mehmet Ali, and a lot of Albanians migrated to Egypt at stage because they were favoured for work and all sorts of things.
Wow.
Yep, that's another story. Yeah, the story of Mehmet Ali. It's an interesting story. He ended up attacking the Ottoman Empire and conquering vast swathes of land right up until Syria, until the Ottomans called upon the British and they did a deal, and each person had their own defined sphere of influence,
Right.
where Mehmet would rule Egypt but acknowledge the suzerainty of the Sultan. He couldn't control anything, but it was like, okay, he's supreme leader.
Yeah.
So that's that. But the monasteries' rights were respected.
Right.
These ideas of sovereignty evolved through national states.
Correct.
Okay. So that was before then. But now it's a different situation.
Mm.
But who are the players? You know, you can say, well, Greece, Greek Orthodoxy. So they have a stakeholder. Most of the monks are Greek.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an Egyptian monastery in Egypt.
Mm.
To what extent does Greece have a say, should have a say? What about the rest of the Orthodox world?
Mm.
Question is, how invested are they? I was reading an article in Kathimerini where they were asking about Russian involvement, because we know that Russia's made a lot of inroads into Africa through missionary work in opposition to the Greek Orthodox Church. So
Really?
there's that aspect which we don't understand much about, and what's going on, if anything, because a lot of that could be fueled by paranoia.
Mm-hmm.
And it all comes down to, in my opinion, respect for property rights. I don't think it's got anything to do with sovereignty, in my opinion.
Right.
You have an institution that's been there for a very long time through basic laws which apply across the board. Anglo-Saxon world with their own common law, or the Napoleonic Code, which Egypt follows, or the base of it. Adverse possession laws. You occupy something for a very, very long period of time, it should be recognised as yours, even if you can't advance paperwork to show how it was bought because it's so old. You know, it's kind of a similar thing here in Australia where we have the laws for native title.
Mm.
You know, these people were there. I mean, obviously they're native people; they didn't come to the area.
Yeah.
But it's that idea of continuous use of you need to demonstrate continuous use of a parcel of land before you advance to the next stage to claim your title. And that's what should be happening here. It's not, because then there's that other thing that we need to face. Now, it's a predominantly Muslim country in which the Christian minority, which is large, the Coptics, about 10 million, not treated very well.
Even to this day.
No. They don't have the same, I mean, on paper they have the same rights as their Muslim counterparts, but practically they face many difficulties.
Yeah.
And that prejudice against Christian people applies across the board, many situations. And I think that there's a public policy component to this, which is that the Egyptian government doesn't want to be seen to be, I wouldn't say kowtowing to the Christians, but at least they want to be seen advancing a very robust point of view of sovereignty to show that the Christians are not getting the better of them. And let's look at it from the adverse. What happens if all of these Muslim groups that once lived, especially in northern Greece, Drama and the mosques there, say, well, you know what? We built these mosques, which they did. We want them and we want to use them and we want to control what happens to them. What happens? Greece's automatic reaction will be, well, look, these belong to the state. They're antique monuments, they're antiquity laws, and here we go around the merry-go-round. It's very complicated. And I think that it's sad that in this 21st century, monuments and institutions of great antiquity can't have their rights respected. But you look at what's happening in Turkey with the Ecumenical Patriarchate, where its land holdings are constantly questioned, where you have the orphanage in Prinkipo. They couldn't get permits to do anything with it, and it's decaying. And now they're trying to see whether they can develop it into a hotel. I mean, the
The school that was actually closed down?
Khalki is different. Yeah, well, Khalki cannot be used as a theological school. So there is, if you like, as we here in the Anglosphere understand it, no real respect of absolute property rights. The idea that I own a piece of property within its walls, subject to very broad guidelines, I can basically do what I want. That doesn't exist in many parts of the world.
Wow.
And not for legal reasons, but policy reasons and probably reasons that have to do with prejudice. So something to think about. We come from a world, you and I, here in Australia, it's a lovely place, we love it, where we consider certain things to be inalienable rights. But in a lot of parts of the world, that's not the case.
Right. So are we waiting to hear any additional information regarding, is it still in the courts or has it been all resolved now?
That's the other thing about living in the West. We're used to things resolving very quickly. We'll have a chat, we'll have a mediation, we'll go on air and we'll make a pronouncement. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. No, and that's it. These things take time. I mean, this is an issue that's been festering since the 80s.
Yeah.
It's not going to get solved anytime soon.
Yeah. Okay.
So, opsometha, as we say.
So monks,
in Sinai Greek.
Some monks are still there. They just, they're there at the behest and the willingness of the Egyptian government.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. All right. Okay. So if we've got any other news coming through there, we'll make sure we'll bring it up here. Can I move on to something else, Dean?
Something else.
Yes. We, as part of some research we've been doing for this concert that's basically coming up that we're doing at Pan Mac.
Tell the good people who are watching us what this concert is all about.
So at the end of this month, we've basically got a concert where we'll be going through the journey of Alexander the Great, his trip from Macedonia all the way to India and back.
Okay.
And we're engaging a number of different dancing groups. One of the great beauties of living in a country like Australia is access to a number of different cultural groups. In our case, the Armenians, Assyrians, Indians, who are all going to be taking part in this telling of this journey of Alexander the Great. Wasn't able to get any Persians.
Persians are sore. Persians are so.
I wasn't able
sore.
to find any Persians. Would love
Persians love and hate Iskandar at the same time. Why? Because we destroyed Persepolis. It was a terrible thing to do. That's how they speak, by the way. When you get them alone, yeah, that's how they speak. And we burnt down the palace. Alexander was a great cultural vandal. He burnt down the palace of Persepolis. This isn't mentioned in the concert, by the way.
No, we don't mention this in the concert.
Because we don't want to scare the kiddies. But he did do that, and they call him the Horned One.
Really?
Yeah, because he brought down the Persian Empire.
Yeah.
Which for us was a great thing. But for them, not so good.
No.
But, we reconcile ourselves to the fact that we brought Hellenic culture by means of urban renewal through the vandalizing and destruction of cultural heritage.
Well,
it's a great thing.
Only the Persians.
Okay, but that never happened. Continue.
So we've actually got this. So we put together this this concert, and what I found quite interesting is just the parallels in stories across the different cultures. So I think.
So you're referring to the fact that the Armenians think that Alexander the Great was Armenian?
I wasn't referring to that at all.
The Egyptians think that he was Egyptian, and there was in ancient times, during Alexander's time, and a little bit later Hellenistic, this Egyptian myth that his father was actually the pharaoh Nectanebo.
Serious?
Yeah, that's what they said. That his father was Nectanebo, the Egyptian pharaoh, his real father, and he was just brought up as a surrogate, as a cuckoo, if you like, in the Macedonian court.
Wow.
And that he came to Egypt to rediscover his roots. So all of these people tried to make Alexander their own. There's even a tribe, the Turkana tribe in Kenya, who say they are descended from Alexander the Great.
Wow.
And he never went there, anywhere near there. Where soldiers did eventually end up going, and we all thought this was not, it was a pipe dream. We always had this idea that they must have reached China. But he didn't. He died. He got to India and then he went back and he died in Babylon. But members of or descendants of the soldiers that stayed in Sogdia, Bactria, these places did end up in China.
Yeah.
And they formed their own kingdom called Da-Yuan, which means Megali Ionia, Great Ionia. Because in the east, we're known as Yunnan or cognates of that, Iones. In the west, Greeks from the Greci, one of the first tribes the Romans came across. But in the east, Yunan. Yeah. So Dayuan, the Great Ionia, was a small little Greek kingdom with other people living there as well on the outskirts of China in modern day Uzbekistan, Turkestan. So that area, which was then on the outskirts of China. And we only know this because there are no Greek records. The Chinese, who've had an unbroken historiographical record, actually mentioned the War of the 10,000 Heavenly Horses. And that's there. So what happens there is that these Greeks who lived in Dayuan, they were good at breeding horses and really sturdy horses, not the Przewalski horses in the Mongolian steppes, which are a bit smaller. These were like the tanks of their age, proper war horses. And the Chinese emperor said, great, I'll have 10,000, thanks. So, put his order on eBay. When can we deliver? Pays for them. And then the Greeks say, no, we're not going to give you the horses, bugger that.
But I get the money though, right?
Well, according to some accounts, they did.
Wow.
So the Chinese declared war on them and caused them to give up the horses.
Give up the horses.
That's the War of the 10,000 Heavenly Horses. Heavenly because they were amazing.
Never heard of the story.
I remember I'd go to Greece and I'd tell people, and this is what happened. No, where do you get this? There's no sources. There's the Chinese sources. Things that we forget, other people remember.
Right.
And scholars, archaeologists, the people in the know, they have confirmed this. The Chinese are actually really interesting. They write and describe about winemaking in the area and how they made wine and what they did and the sculptures and That's the furthest extent of Greek sovereignty in the sense of a kingdom with a Greek component running itself.
And where was it exactly?
That's on the border of Uzbekistan and China.
Oh, right.
So that right there.
Right there.
Yeah. That was the borderland at that stage. And they say, although we can't prove this, that the warriors, the terracotta warriors in the tomb of the emperor that are so famous that they were inspired, their features were inspired by Greek sculpture, or that Greek artisans may have been assisting. And the Chinese don't like this very much. They say that's colonialism. What you're trying to say is that nothing good could have happened without Western help.
Yeah.
And I can't comment on the extent of Greek involvement in the terracotta warriors, but the scholars do say that there's a stylistic shift in the way that people are portrayed at that period of time, and people may have been inspired by contact with Greek sculpture further west. That's something to think about.
Well,
it's the fact that, culture is a continuum. It
Absolutely,
travels.
but
It's
what's
like
common-
blue jeans. Yeah.
What's commonly accepted though
Or
is
Taylor Swift.
Oh, gee.
Are you a
Yeah.
Swiftie?
Not a Swiftie. I'm afraid not. No, I could never appreciate the music. Never been slighted by
I have a theory that Taylor Swift is trying to take over the banking world.
Why not?
You
Hasn't
think about
she
this, when
already?
you want to make an international transaction, what do they ask you for? They ask you for the Swift code.
Of course. Of course, yeah.
They don't ask you for the Da Vinci Code. It's a conspiracy. The Illuminati are behind this. You know this.
Oh,
Or if in Cyprus, the Illuminati. I think we've used that one before.
we have.
Yeah,
But,
I repeat myself because I'm old.
Well, it's not just that, but some people just haven't come across every single one of our episodes. So it's very good to throw it in every so often.
Okay, that's a shameless plug for what is
Watch the rest of the
benign
episodes.
and banal series of excremental discussions, and we won't. I won't deign to discuss them any
The
further.
personification of the Buddha apparently is ascribed to the Greeks moving into the area.
So
right?
if you're in Gandhara, which was the ancient Bactria in these areas, there was a syncretism. They brought through the Greeks who settled there brought through their aesthetic and married it with the local aesthetic, and that's what came up. And you see these amazing statues of Hercules there and of the Buddha, and the Buddha looks almost like Hercules or Dionysus.
Yeah.
And that happens for a while until then they merge into something else. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the first Greek king who was Buddhist lived in Bactria.
Really?
Yeah,
Did not know that
absolutely he
at all.
did.
Yeah. So anyway, the concert, we'll not go into that level
Oh, we're
of
talking
detail.
about a concert, aren't we?
we're,
Yeah,
not, we're not going to that level of
No,
detail.
So the concert is called Alexander's Journey, and it's the journey of Alexander.
Yes. That's all.
And basically what happens here is what? He travels because, spoiler alert, he dies in Babylon.
He does.
By the rivers of Babylon, we sat down and wept. Not for Alexander, but for everything else that's going on in the world. Why? What's the point? Why bring up this concert about a man who whose life is so well
It's a
known,
good question.
who we know how the story ends, Pete.
Good question. I'm quite shocked at just how many of our own kids don't know the story and don't know who he was. And I would guess that the viewers of this show would find that very perplexing.
Just if I can open up a little parenthesis here, no one can speculate on the amount of children that Peter has. No one knows this. And we won't go there. But the fact that he's amazed that our children, and I need to point out that him and I have no common children together. Please don't, I mean, it's fine, and this is the 21st century, but he and I do not have children together. Close bracket.
Yeah.
Unless you consider this concept the bastard child of our imagination.
Well, I think that it is.
You do, don't you?
I think that it is important to teach our kids about our history. I don't think that by doing it via lectures or telling them to read a book is particularly good. I think if we rely on Netflix or these other producers to produce a show that would somehow teach them something about it is akin to being akin to us selling our soul, and I do believe that we should be telling our own stories to our own kids.
What is our own story, though? Because this is the thing. Alexander means so many things to so many people.
Yeah.
What is it that you want to tell kids about Alexander? And is it just for kids?
The concert, well, no, I don't think the concert's just for kids, to be honest. I don't think
it's for kids at all.
Well,
There's no Taylor Swift in it.
No. But I think it's important for them to know the impact he had on the world.
Imagine if Taylor Swift was with Alexander and it was like the Eras tour. Instead of the journey of Alexander or I Kathodos των Μυρίων, the March of the 10,000, any of that, it was the Taylor Swift Eras tour, bringing love to the East. Could she have gotten as far as India? Would they have poisoned her before she had left Tyre or Byblos or Pelusium?
They would never have dreamed of doing such a thing to Taylor.
Or the Battle of Issus. Issus? I don't know.
But don't you think it's important, Dean?
What? Knowing who Alexander the Great is?
Well,
Alexander,
the impact he had on the world, and the fact that we had a Greek-speaking world for a number of years, I think almost over a millennia, because of his influence.
So is that colonialism? And is colonialism good if we're the ones doing it? Because it is colonialism. I mean, look at it that way. When you, in the modern zeitgeist, where they talk about colonies and the fact that countries like Britain, France, took over large swathes of the world and then imposed their words, not mine, well, I kind of agree.
But did he do that?
Their culture.
Did he impose
He didn't live
Greek
long enough
culture?
to do it, but the people that came after him did. So the question is this a form of colonialism? And is it the mark of a small, insecure and vulnerable people to aggrandize these achievements so many centuries after they've been and gone? I'll give you an example. I did this experiment with a couple of kids when I was teaching Greek school. They knew nothing about Alexander the Great.
Right.
So I gave them the bare bones. Here's this guy, and he attacks, and he takes over all these areas of the world, and he burns the palace of Persepolis, and he gets as far as India, and he wants to reach the world, but his soldiers say, no, bugger that.
Yeah.
Then he leads them across the desert, and they die because of his obstinacy in having to cross the Gedrosian desert instead of following a better path because he said so. And then he's assassinated by an Assyrian mosquito in Babylon. And they said, he must have been a really bad man. And your natural reaction as a Greek, having been brought up with the nationalistic historical narratives, he was the greatest. You can't, that defeats the purpose. The whole idea is we want to instill pride in our children. Do you have to feel pride in a person who conquers in order to feel good about being Greek?
No, you don't have to.
But it kind of helps.
Well,
it's like the French being proud of Napoleon, maybe.
Well, they are, aren't they?
Yeah, but we're not proud of Hitler.
Well, no.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the kind of flip side to that is that, Napoleon and Alexander the Great didn't just massacre millions of people for no reason on the basis of their race.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these do not bear comparison. They do not. Except for the fact of Lebensraum. But I mean, what is the idea of Alexander? What are we trying to say in this play? And I should ask myself this question because I wrote the script. But is it the fact that, I mean, in many ways the story is a tragedy, isn't it? Because it doesn't end well. He dies.
Well, don't we all?
Isn't the fact that, Life is a tragedy. That's very deep. We're going very deep today.
Very deep today.
Let's form a circle and hold virtual hands. Don't. I've washed mine though, by the way. I did do this. It's a requirement of the show. But the idea that you feel compelled to just move on and never stop and never be satiated, never be satisfied, is that a tragedy? Is that greatness? What is greatness? These are the questions that I ask. And these are the things that I grapple with, because he's a fascinating figure. I mean, you're a young guy, and in the space of no time at all, you conquer the known world. That is an achievement. But is it an achievement when you die, when your vision hasn't been clearly articulated, because it wasn't? No, I mean, we originally started off wanting to punish the Persians and neutralizing the Persians as a security threat for Greece.
Yes, that's right.
On that point, he failed.
In what way?
Because Persia, after a certain period of time, became resurgent and was an ever-pressing and present threat to the Greek world. It's what brought down Byzantium as a multi-ethnic large empire and allowed the rise of Islam, which completely changed the world, because we spent all our time, could argue it also brought down the Roman Empire before us, before Byzantium, if you consider those separate. I mean, you can argue it's the same thing, but the poles of the world were Greece fighting the Parthians, Rome fighting the Parthians, and that exhausted, and then the Byzantines as a continuation of Rome fighting the Persians. So that never went away.
No.
They became resurgent. That didn't happen. What did happen was, as you said, the Greek language spread further than had ever been spread before. And then the Greek language did what? Contracted. So you had a period where the Greek language...
Took a while to contract, though.
Yeah, absolutely, because everyone gets a turn. No, empires wax and wane. For example, the Epikratis its Anglosferas, the Anglosphere, that's a relatively new phenomenon.
It is, yeah.
And we who have possessed of unique historical memories as being a venerable tribe of Greeks will laugh and scoff, because we had Greek as a language of culture and literature for a very, very long time, centuries. We gave the Copts their alphabet. If you go into a Coptic church, you'll understand half of the liturgy because it's in Greek. We gave the Russians and the Slavic peoples an alphabet.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we did. And not Kirill Makedonsky and any of that stuff. It was the brothers from Thessaloniki, the bros, as it were. Bros before.
Yeah.
And even the Goths, we gave the Goths an alphabet. And the person who gave the Goths an alphabet, the scribe Ulfilas and the monk, was actually a Greek captive of the Goths who was taken to the land of the Goths, renamed Ulfila, and he provided them with an alphabet. And he wrote down their Bible for the first time. So, yeah, all of that happened, and that allowed for the spread of Christianity. So you read books where it says, well, God was working through Alexander because he allowed him to spread the Greek language, without which Christianity wouldn't have spread. Now, that's an interesting theory. But the fact is that Christianity, as we understand it in the West, spread through the Greek language. There was a parallel tradition, the Assyrian tradition, and the Syriac tradition, and the Aramaic tradition, where Christianity spread from that point all the way to China. And that died out, and it's also, we're very far removed of it, and we don't discuss that often, but that happened as well. So, yes, there's an interplay, and now it's gone. And now we're in Australia saying our kids don't speak Greek anymore.
That's right.
And we're in America, and I read an article recently in the paper which says that the Greek language, the American language is dying out in America. It actually is too, that's true. But the Greek language is dying out in America. And I think there's, well, that's the thing. These are perennial themes. There's that famous Kavafi poem, «Και την ελληνικήν λαλιάν ως μέσα στην Βακτριανή την πήγαμε ως τους Ινδούς». We took the Greek language into Bactria, right up to the Indians. But that's the irony of Kavafi. It's not there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it's that. Maybe it is a symbol of the perennial struggle to exceed oneself, to push one's boundaries, to be trapped within an ever-evolving vision that you're not in control of. And at the end of the day, who has the final laugh? Death. Mes enfants, we're all going to die. Even us. But Romaic Ruminations will probably not live on. YouTube will remove it.
If they know what's good for it, yeah.
So is that kind of the motivation, or do you just want to put on a good show that people can have a laugh with and have
I'll
fun?
laugh. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a very funny show, to be honest.
Alexander really didn't have a sense of humour, did he?
I don't know.
No. You'd be sitting there having a piss up, as we say in Australia, with a beer or gracie or whatever, and someone would poke fun at him, and he'd just grab a spear and spear them. You know, Alexander kebab, Iskandar kebab, that kind of stuff. Didn't have a sense of humour.
He wouldn't have lasted on this show.
We wouldn't have lasted on this show.
We wouldn't have lasted.
Romaic impalements? You get imminent impalements. Absolutely. But a figure who's, I know that in all of the great military academies around the world, not that I've ever been to them, but I know this for a fact, they study his battles, they study his strategy.
Yeah.
The way that he overcome challenges, looked at obstacles, how he kept his troops together. I mean, a lot of these people did not share that vision. They didn't want to go all that way there.
Yeah.
How do you keep them in line? How do you move them along? All these things, as a general, as a strategist, as a leader, they look at all of that. So look, maybe being great is not about having an impeccable moral compass and being a saint. Maybe it's just about achieving things that other people can't or won't achieve. Yeah, maybe that's the question. Great.
It's a story that our people should know, though. Regardless of what you might think of the moral implications of what he basically did in the past, it's the story that we should basically know.
But the whole idea of Alexander is that it's an amazing story. And it's given rise to para-stories. There's the Alexander romance, where he searches for immortality. He flies in the air through flying contraptions.
What's this?
The Alexander romance was very, very, very popular, especially in early Byzantine times, and it travelled all the way through the Middle East and Europe. And there were things there about him travelling to the Caspian Gates where the giants were imprisoned that would...
These are stories?
Yeah, these are stories that people made up. The para-legends around Alexander the Great. Wow. So you have your Netflix series, and then you have your legends of, you know what I mean? Like Vikings Valhalla, except it's Alexander. So they believed that there were two great giants imprisoned in the Caspian Mountains, Gog and Magog, and that they would bring about the apocalypse and the end of the world, and Alexander would put them in place and keep them there. So So there were all these things that were happening. That he went to the land of he did go to the land of the Gymnosophists. He was the first Greek that discovered yoga. That's true. He went to the land of the Indians and spoke to the people there. The yogis who were walking around with no clothes, who were ascetics. And they say, although there are scholars who don't agree with this, they say that the whole ascetic monkish tradition was brought to the Middle East by the Indians who then travelled west with Alexander. And you have, for example, the legend of Varlam and Yosafat, which was a very famous Byzantine legend, which ended up becoming part of the religion that is modeled on the birth of the Buddha. So you have all of these interesting things. And all because this guy decided to go east instead of going west, like the song says. He went east, and that's what happened.
Do we take our traditions and our stories east as well? The reason why I ask this is I came across a story in Assyrian culture. I think it's a song. And it talked about how a man would sacrifice his wife in order for a bridge not to collapse.
Let me tell you a story. So my wife, she's Assyrian.
Yes.
Yeah. And all about her know that this is so. Well, she speaks Assyrian. And so we're driving the car. We're newly married. Yeah. And as is her wont, she puts on Assyrian songs. And they're all very happy songs.
Yeah.
And all Assyrian songs seem to come from the 1980s. Nothing before. And I'll sit with my brother-in-law and he'll play a song and okay. No, 1980s Assyrian music is like 1960s Kazanzilis or Gavalas, where they have the harmonio. Spare me. And he says, you know, brother, this is a very old song. I'm like, how old is it? 1980s. And we laugh. 1980s, we've got songs from up to Geropovikitorizi, as we say. But, and he says, no, well, we don't know what happened before because our songs were destroyed, because our culture was destroyed, because we suffered constant persecution. We were thrown out of our villages. We came to the city. We lost our culture. And this is the only thing that we've got to hang on to. So I'm always very, sarcastic about the enorchistros, the arrangement of these songs. But I can understand where they're coming from. So I'm driving, and I hear this song. That's a very happy tune. What's all that about? And she says, well, you know what? There's this man, and he has to build a bridge. But the bridge keeps on falling down.
Yeah, man.
And he's told he needs to sacrifice. I'm like, hang on. Saranda pende mastori kexinda mathitades. Join in Yofiri ethemelion anstis artas to Yofi. To potami olomeris. To chtizaneti nichta gremizotan. All that. And she's saying, what's happened? You're having a stroke. You're right. You want me to drive? And I was saying, no, we have this legend.
Yes.
And she's saying, no, we've had it first.
Oh, yes.
That's always the argument I have with my wife. Because the whole idea is the Assyrians are an older culture. They came before the Greeks. Obviously, we copied.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is garbage. and I will prove by the end that it is garbage. And I said, okay, well, tell me the story. So in the Assyrian legend, what happens is the man is building the bridge. Okay. The bridge is falling down. You can't get it to stay up. Again, we were talking about Viagra last time. Anyway. So what is Viagra for bridges? Gishre. That's the word for bridge in Assyrian. Bridges in Assyrian.
Sacrifice?
He's told, you need to sacrifice the first thing that you're going to meet along the way that comes to you. So from a distance he sees his daughter or his niece, according to some things, and he freaks out, oh my God, this is not good, this can't happen. And she's accompanied by her dog. And that's the bit where I'm thinking this must be a later interpolation because Assyrians hate dogs and they especially hate them in the house. But she's there with her pet dog and the pet dog is coming before her, is preceding her. It's like, oh, thank God, we'll just kill the dog and we'll be over and done with.
Yeah.
But then the dog starts sniffing around at stuff, as dogs do, and she comes first. And he's beside himself. Why are you beside yourself, daddy or Theo or whatever? This is the situation. If I don't sacrifice you, the bridge is going to keep on collapsing and it's going to be a problem for me. According to the Kurds, who also have this legend, because they all inhabit the same space, it's the Prince of Boltan who tells him to build this bridge, and he had asked him to build another bridge, and when he finished building that bridge, he chopped his hand off so he wouldn't build another bridge like it or something like that. So that's a bit of a backstory according to some of the legends. And she knows that the Prince of Boltan is a really nasty guy. And what do you call the Prince of Boltan's mother? I'll leave that for you. So she agrees to be sacrificed, and then her husband comes along. So she's being built into the bridge, and she's holding the bridge up with her arms. And her husband starts digging and saying, I'm going to get you out. She's saying, stop it, you're hurting me. It's my decision to be entombed within this bridge. And as a result, she stays there. And what they do is they leave ribbons and they grow very perpendicular plants along the sides to show that you could see this, the plates of Dalale is her name. That's the name of the girl. And this bridge exists on the river Khabur, which flows from Iraq into Syria, and it's a tributary of the Tigris. The two major rivers that flow through Iraq are Mesopotamia, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. It's a tributary of the Tigris, and it's a very large center for Assyrians, city of Zacho, for those of you who know. So you take that, and then you compare that with the story of our bridge, Stinarta. That's the one I was saying before. Yeah. Where it says there's the bit where it's almost exactly the same, where they're building, but in the Sarandapende Mastori, we had more technical help. Exinda mathitades, and they're saying, why isn't it holding up? And then they say, no, andes tichoste anthropo yefiri desterioni. You got to put a person in the bridge. That whole idea of human sacrifice. That's why when they used to build houses in traditional times in Greece, and they'd put the blood or they'd bury him in the foundations to make sure that the house remains. Wow. Which, to us seems barbaric, but there you go. And the idea that the lady comes, but in our story, she's tricked into going into the bridge.
Oh, really?
So this is a feminist take on the Bridge of Arta and the parallel myths. Okay, with Dalale, the guy's straight with her. This is a situation. We don't get this bridge to stay up. I'm stuffed. He says, don't worry, I'll go in the bridge. I'll make this sacrifice for you. In our one, or Protomastoras, he says, I've lost my ring in the bridge. That's why I'm sad. And she goes in and to retrieve the ring, and they start building on top of her.
Wow.
So there's no choice here.
Yeah.
There's no consent. And she starts bewailing her and bemoaning her fate, saying, Tris aderfes hija, και τρεις κακογραμμένες, bad fate. Η μία έχτισε το Δούναβι, τον άλλη τον Αφράτη, τον Εφράτη. So there's two very important things here. This song, το Γιοφύρι της Άρτας, links that song and that bridge with the Danube River in Romania, where they also have the same myth. And Euphrates, which is where? In Mesopotamia. Okay, it's not the Tigris, it's next door, but it's in exactly the same area. So you see how all these myths are interconnected. And you may ask, although you haven't, and you should, how are they connected and why are they connected? Now, the bridge in Zaho, they say belongs to Roman times. But we know that from the early Ottoman times, stonemasons from Ipiros were traveling the whole length and breadth of the Ottoman Empire repairing bridges. We've got photographs from the late 19th century of stonemasons traveling to Persia to fix bridges.
Wow.
And they were really good at it, those Ottoman arched bridges.
Yeah.
They went to Romania a lot, especially in Ipiros, όπου υπάρχουν πολλοί Βλάχοι, Vlach-speaking people, who speak a language which is very close to Romanian.
Yeah.
So they could go up and down easily. They went there. So it exists in Romania, the myth. It exists in Iraq, of all places, where you wouldn't readily connect with Greece. Although there are tribes there that say they are descended from Alexander the Great. And the Albanians also have it. In the Albanian myth, when they're building the woman into the bridge, immuring is the word. In endihizun, endihizun mesa, sti Gefira. She says, well, I've got young children, what will become of them? Yeah. And they leave a space so she can at least expose one breast so she can suckle the children.
There you go.
Which is very, very powerful, mother's love. But they all accept their fate. And it's an amazing thing. And I mean, Arta is an interesting place. This is Arta, which was the capital of the Byzantine Ipiros. You know that after 1204, with the Latin Crusades, Greece split into, or the Byzantine world split into various despotisms and empires, Empire of Nicaea, Empire of Trapezunda, and the Despotate of Ipiros. Well, the capital was at Arta for a very long time and presided over a great renaissance of art, culture, and literature. Agia Theodora, an amazing woman there who was a ruler of Arta. And if you're from other parts of Ipiros, Pete, you look at Arta a bit strangely and say, not really. Η Άρτα απελευθερώθηκε πρώτα από όλη την Ήπειρο. That was the first part that was was liberated, and then they'd look over the bridge and look at everything else, and then the rest followed a while after that.
Right.
And there's some great literature. There's a book called Imaret in 2 volumes about that period of time where Arta was liberated, but the rest of the hinterland wasn't, and what happened there. But yeah, so that is how you get a legend connecting places, but even more importantly, a song which refers to those places and connects those places.
We've got one too. That's what I mean. The Pontis have got one as well. Yeah,
because contrary to common belief, in times of old, people did travel. And people did share these myths. I mean, you get Ipirotika Tragudia, the stichi, the verses from Ipiros, you find them all the way to Thrace. And you say, why is this? The music's different. Because these people traveled. They would travel to Constantinople, that was a thoroughfare, go back and forth and settle in those areas as well.
I just find it fascinating that this one
We're not the only migrants.
Yeah,
there are other migrants out there.
One story, it's so specific about sacrificing someone for a bridge to stay up to have gone from, let's say, from Ipiros all the way through to Iraq. It's just,
that's assuming that the story starts in Ipiros. We don't know where it starts from. The Serbs have the story as well.
Yeah.
My argument is that it comes from Ipiros. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, it's a great story. And yeah, that's how you see cultures converge, coalesce. By the way, the Assyrians are interesting because they were the only people that actually welcomed Alexander. So there's that welcoming into Babylon. They didn't close the gates. They didn't say, no. You know what? They welcomed him. So they were smart because they had lost their empire. They had been conquered by the Persians. This guy comes along and says, Xenos in there. He hasn't been here for a long time. Don't worry. We'll feed him kebab. We'll feed him kileche, their biscuits. We'll look after him. We'll be nice to him. And
there's a good section and concept with regards to that. Yeah.
And then when he's not looking, we'll get a mosquito to kill him, infect him with malaria, which is what they did. So thank you very much for your hospitality. Yes. It's great. And you know the other thing about the Assyrians, Pete?
What's that?
I read recently that a whole lost section of some mathematical treatise, ancient Greek treatise, was found in an Arabic translation. And that's the only place where it exists. And there's that well-rehearsed trope that the West rediscovered ancient Greek literature and culture through Arabic translations, which is not entirely true. It's actually quite incorrect.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them did find the Arabs in Spain during the Reconquista reading ancient Greek texts, but a lot of the ancient Greek texts were readily available, had been translated by the Syriac-speaking people, the Assyrians, because a lot of them were part of the Byzantine Empire to begin with.
Yeah.
And then they were on the periphery of the Byzantine Empire, and they were still Christians, and they were still looking into that world, even though they'd been conquered by the Arabs, mes enfants. So they had translated not only liturgies and other texts relating to their faith, but also ancient Greek philosophy into Syriac, and then they were the ones who translated it from Syriac into Arabic for their Arab overlords. And that Greek philosophy played a very important role in the foundation of Islamic theology and various schools of thought. Especially there's a Neoplatonic streak running through some sections, schools of Islamic thought. And there's a tension between them and more fundamentalist Muslim interpretations of the Quran, for example, back then. It's really, really interesting for those who are into that kind of thing. I'm not, so I'm going to stop talking here. But yeah, culture mediated through the middleman being the Assyrians of the Middle East, translating these for the Arabs. Yeah, something that we don't know much about. Also, we don't know much about the fact there's a lot of Assyrians here who speak Greek. Now, we've got a Greek-speaking community of Assyrians who live in Australia who we don't have much to do with. But you see them from time to time when Greek singers come, especially the old ones, because a lot of these people came here in the 90s. You'll find them at the concerts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Antipodes Festival in Melbourne, you'll find them all coming to the concert, especially if it's some singer of unspeakably bad taste, which it never is because they always pick great people to come here. Yeah. That's what I have to say about that. It's really interesting. Yeah, you get these parallel Greek-speaking cultures. That's one of the other things that come out of Alexander's legacy. The fact that you live not in the nation-state thing is a new thing, but that you live in a cultural continuum where you can travel back and forth. There are people of all stripes who can partake of a culture, leave it, merge, emerge, disappear, all at the same time and negotiate their Hellenism differently. Goes back, I think, to what we said about Favorinus last week. What makes a Greek? Don't know.
That was pretty interesting. Speaking of what makes a Greek, there is there was some reading I was doing on Syracuse recently.
Syracuse,
yeah. And because you know there are a number of Italians that come from places like Sicily and Calabria and
Italians.
Yes, right.
Italians.
Yeah, so and those areas were ancient Greek areas, predominantly Greek speaking before they were conquered by the Romans, and the Romans did spend a lot of time trying to conquer Syracuse.
Syracuse was the Greek success story. It was a colony that was founded by the Corinthians. Left Corinth, went to Syracuse.
That's right, yeah.
The early coins of Syracuse are interesting because they have written them in inscriptions. In the old alphabet, letters which we no longer use, like Q. So it's Sira
really?
or Sion, which is a glottal q. That was the original Q, which exists in Arabic, Syriac, these kind of languages, but has left modern Greek.
Right.
So they used that in the early coins. If you find them, they're there. And it was a multi-rich, multi-powerful, amazing success story. It was a colony. It was the New World. It was our America. And played a very important role in Greek politics. Was a massive draw card for migration. And you had some really, really strong kings. You had your Hiero, you had your Yelon, who I think died because he used to use an infected toothpick. Amazing leaders, amazing wealth, and always part of the Greek world. And, you know, I mean, a figure that you find very interesting, Alcibiades, led the ill-fated Athenian expedition to Syracuse. And we all know what happened there, you know, with the Athenians ending up in the mines. Not a good idea. A center of, they were fighting off Roman incursions. They were fighting the Phoenicians, who were down the south and in the west, trying to take over. So there's this constant attempt to remain alive and to remain free from domination, which eventually doesn't happen because eventually Syracuse gets conquered by the Romans, and you have that great Archimedes, who creates all sorts of engines in order to keep the Romans at bay. Did he burn them with the massive magnifying glass, the ships, you know, all of the various siege engines? And there's that great scene where he's sitting there working out calculations, and the soldiers come to kill him. He says, you know, don't disturb my circles and what I'm doing. I'm trying to work out what I'm doing here, and he gets the chop. Because it's not a good idea to be smart-ass to soldiers, does it, when they're holding, especially Romans who were barbarous people. Imagine if that had happened and it was a Greek soldier. You know, walks in, there's Archimedes working circles. Εντάξει ρε φίλε, θα κάνω ένα τσιγάρο και θα έρθω. Εντάξει, ησυχία σου, άντε. That's the Greek way. The Roman way is no chop. And what a philosopher and scientist was lost with Archimedes. I mean, seriously. Seriously. The man who invented Eureka.
Yes.
And trying to work out water displacement.
Advertised it in a very, very interesting way.
Yeah. That's the thing. When Archimedes said Eureka and jumped out of his bath, everyone said, there goes another streaker, and leapt away from his path. We had to learn that at school.
I like
which is great. But
I never learned that one.
Yeah, Romans are interesting because, yes, southern Italy, all of the Magna Graecia, as we say, all of the colonies, and still some Greek-speaking villages, although that's dying out.
Yeah.
That's not their first language. A great legacy. And they're pretty cool about that legacy. They don't have this problem with it.
No, they don't.
They're very comfortable with it.
By actually.
No, because they put it this way. And we tend to focus on ancient times. And yes, there were other migrations during Byzantine times, but there were also migrations of Albanians. And a heavy migration of Albanians and Albanian-speaking people into especially Calabria, Puglia, these areas. And this continued even in Ottoman times. So that ancient Greek Riza, if you like, was replenished every so often. But there were other people there. The Arabs invaded Sicily and created a kingdom where Latin, Greek, and Arabic were all used. And there was some modicum of tolerance for a while, and everyone had a stake in the government for a while until it was conquered by the Normans. And then you have the Normans coming, who were exactly the same people that took over England. So you had the Norman invasion of England around about the same time. You had the Norman invasion of Sicily and Calabria.
Wow. I did not know the Normans went that far down.
In the Byzantine era, you had the Lombards coming down.
Yeah, Lombards.
So it's not just a territory which historically belongs to us.
No.
And no one ever speaks about the native people who were there first. You know, your Samnites, your Sicels, it's the Sikelia, which where they got their name. No one talks about them.
No.
So, look, it's one of those places where it's fascinating. We were there, especially Sicily's got beautiful ancient ruins wherever you go, Agrigentum, Segesta, amazing ruins and amazing Byzantine churches. And in Calabria, Byzantine churches, some of which now have been graciously given to us to use. There's the amazing monastery of Grottaferrata in southern Italy, which has been open since Byzantine times. It belongs to the Catholic Church, but they have been using the liturgy in Greek ever since it was founded, according to the liturgy of St. Basil.
Wow.
And they're still there, preserving that little bit of Hellenic tradition, if you like, from that period of time. Why? Because they're comfortable with it. They're comfortable with it because and they're okay with that. And they don't have this paranoia that people try and claim sections of Italy for themselves. I mean, it's a pipe dream. We're not about to go and liberate Italy now, are we? It's a nice try. I mean, we can give it a go, but
Liberate what?
it's a beautiful place. You've been to Italy. I've been to Italy.
Yeah.
And what I found is I started from the top and moved my way down. And, you know, that northern Italy is beautiful.
It is, yes.
Florence, the Tuscany, the Rome. But then as you start traveling after Naples,
Yeah.
things start getting eerily familiar. The people,
The attitude.
the landscape, the unfinished buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfinished buildings as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
And you say, I think I know where I am and I think
Yeah.
I know what to do here.
Yeah.
It's amazing, those cultural affinities of these lands that lie in the
Rome
sun.
there's a
That's
huge
beautiful.
dividing line with
I think
Rome,
so.
I find. So north of Rome is very
and,
different to south.
And it's great. It's great that they can celebrate all of the layers of their cultures. Maybe we can learn something from it.
No, we won't.
Well, I'll learn from it. You can sit on the sidelines and do other things. They're amazing. And I mean, you get all of these here in, I met many Italians here with the surname Greco.
Yes, it's true.
And that was great in at school. You're Greek. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. They get upset. Your name says you're Greek.
Yeah.
And same with Maltese. The word Grech or Grech, that means the Greek. And I think we need to do a program about the Greeks in Malta because they're really interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
We should
Let's
do
put
this
that down
stage.
for...
We'll forget it, but we should do it.
Yeah, there's so many things we say we cannot discuss. We don't make any... We should actually watch our own show every so often to remind ourselves.
I don't watch. I don't watch. I can't even look at myself in the mirror when I'm shaving, let alone watch the show. I mean, come on.
And we're done.
We are?
Yeah.
Somehow I feel deflated and,
You always feel deflated.
and unfulfilled. Well, Peter, as I always say, I tend to say that the pleasure was moderate. This time I'll say I'll go out the back and look for the pleasure, and if I find it, I'll let you know. Good luck with your show.
Yeah, you'll be there, right?
Well,
Must be there.
Depends.
I'll get you a ticket.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, so mate.
Yeah.